Maybe I can start first because I have them here already before you guys see them. It's not all bad actually. The manufacturers are doing a good job. Let's say one manufacturer in particular is doing a pretty good job in getting aircraft delivered. So we had certainly had. So please go to slide 3 of mine. That would be cool. Yeah. So if you look at the aircraft deliveries, we see a significant growth in June and July. And then we see a decreasing number in August, which is, well, it's summer, and people, I don't want to say work less, but that's probably the case. So we had really, really low numbers in April. And then in May, in April, we only had 15 deliveries throughout the whole world. And then we had a rapid growth in June, and that continued in July. And then in August, we're going down a bit. So it'll be really interesting to see, but as you can see, that is a trend that had happened in years before. So it will be very interesting to see what will happen now in September, October, November, December. If you're here to get some insight what will happen in winter, you won't hear it from me. I don't know, and I really stopped making predictions. I will just look at these numbers and hopefully by the end of this month we'll see a bit more of a trend. But we're literally just at this threshold right now. Summer has ended and fall is starting now. So I'm completely undecided, and we'll see that later in my poll. Please, the next slide. If we look at Boeing, deliveries are super bad. But as you can see, it wasn't only due to Corona. It already started in January and February because of that MAX grounding. So that is still affecting them the most, I would say. I will see that when we look at Airbus now. Very interesting to notice is that Boeing currently mainly delivers freighters. So in May, they had 3 aircraft delivered, and that were freighters. And then in August now, they delivered 9 aircraft, 3 of them for FedEx, 2 for United Airlines, 1 for Airbus, 1 for ANA, 1 for Lufthansa Cargo, and then for Vistara. Airbus is doing a significantly better job. If we look at the next slide, Airbus is having a pretty good output right now. They've managed to deliver 29 aircraft now in August, which makes it a 65% of the number that they had a year earlier. They also had the lowest point in April with only aircraft, but then they went back pretty fast, and they had 55 aircraft delivered in July, and then a slight decrease in August. If you're interested, who is taking these aircraft right now, and it's mainly A320neos and narrow-body aircraft. It was Wizz Air, Delta, Lufthansa, Shenzhen, Volaris, and then some others. So that's it for the 2 largest manufacturers right now. There is still output. And if you look at this next slide, and we're looking at the grounded fleet, then we can see that the peak is far behind us. So we had that peak of 59% of the global fleet grounded at the end of April. And then since then, more and more aircraft are coming back from storage. And the trend is slowly coming to a halt, just because summer is over now. But at the beginning of September, there were only 32% of the global fleet still grounded, and there is 22,179 aircraft back in service. And that is not a bad number. Obviously, it doesn't say much about utilization. I will go into that later for a tiny bit, but it's not such a bad number. So every time you're scared, there's aircraft flying again, and that should, reassure us a bit. If we could go into prepare the next slide, I've prepared a little overview so you can see that, because if you are going after Klaus's presentation here, running out there and trying new things, you maybe want to try it in the markets that are recovering faster. So if we look at this, continent with the most aircraft grounded is South America, and then Africa, and then we have Oceania and North America, Asia, and Europe. But the funny thing is that North America has less aircraft grounded, but they don't have that much capacity. So they're obviously running a different scheme where they're just trying to keep more of their aircraft active and don't put them into long-term storage. Europe is not doing that bad. And then Asia obviously is having quite a good job done in getting over this crisis. If you go to the next slide, and this is probably the slide that will interest you guys the most, that's our top European countries when we talk about ungrounded aircraft. And you can see that Wizz Air is doing a phenomenal job in Hungary, where 96% of the fleet's country is back in the air. Surprisingly to me, I didn't know that, was that the Netherlands, up until I ran these numbers, was that the Netherlands are doing a really good job as well. They have 95% back in the air as well. And then Croatia. And Croatia is a bit out of the norm because it's a very small country, but most of their fleet is back. And that shows that, and we also have Greece on here. So that shows that, and keep in mind, this is numbers from now. So I don't know how it will look in winter, but in Croatia and Greece, that means that they managed under these circumstances to have a significantly better tourism season than expected. And I think both of them did a pretty good job here. And it also shows that, our prejudices towards government-controlled carriers were probably not, or probably need a rethinking, because if Croatia wouldn't have had their own flag carrier, they wouldn't probably have been able to pull off such a season, because politically, beginning of this summer, they said, okay, let's open up the country, let's not screw up this tourism season, and we're just inviting everyone. Their testing strategy, I mean, we can debate about that. I'm not a professional in that sector, but they had a pretty good season until middle of August, and that was partially because a lot of tourists came by car, but also because they had an airline that they could send to all parts of Europe to pick up the tourists. So that's it here for the top 10 European countries. Also, Malta, very interesting now as a haven for AOC. So a lot of airlines are now incorporating their aircraft there, like Ryanair, etc. So they're doing a pretty good job there as well. And then if we look at the next slide, we'll see the top 10 countries that do the worst. And well, surprisingly and unsurprisingly, Lithuania is hit the most. There's only 27% of the fleet of the country back in the air. That's because the country's fleet is small, but also the majority of the country's fleet is used for ACMI and charter work. And because all of the carriers have their own capacity now at abundance, they don't turn to ACMI guys. So Lithuania is definitely struggling from this business model right now. And then we see that because if we go into the numbers, it's Avion Express, GetJet, all these guys that used to fly for the bigger tourist operators are struggling now. And what we also see, and that I found a bit more, well, Lithuania was obvious. What I found more interesting was actually Sweden here on this list with 122 aircraft. It's one of these countries with large fleets that still has a lot of aircraft on the ground, despite everyone saying Sweden did the right thing. But they are extremely cautious, and it's at the beginning when I looked into the numbers, I thought, oh, it's mainly because Norwegian, was anyway defaulting, and it's mainly the Norwegian fleet, but it's actually half. So it's also SAS having a lot of aircraft still grounded, and then Denmark is on here as well, and they have a small fleet. They don't have that many airlines, and then there's two of them that just thought, okay, let's leave the aircraft in the hangar. And that's Sunair and Sunclass, the former Thomas Cook Scandinavia. So we can still also see the aftermath of the Thomas Cook fallout here. If we turn over from the fleet and we'll look at the capacity, we can see that the total number of weekly seats that were scheduled worldwide in 2020, that was increasing until August, and that was stagnating, and now we're a bit on the downturn just because the season here in Europe is over. Let's maybe go into the details for the continents themselves. So maybe the next slide will show us Asia. So we'll see that Asia is, they're far away from what they would have produced last summer, but they're, well, let's say in close distance before they had these massive lockdowns in March. So, and that's probably the one thing to take away from this year. And I would agree with what Ged and Klaus said. I don't think it makes much sense to look at what has been in the past. I think we'll just have to take the situation now here and go forward with it. There is no real use anymore for historical data because it's gone. There is, I think but it's my personal opinion, though I said I don't want to go into opinions, but I think the old is just gone. We have to look forward and draw and paint a new normal. Maybe we go to the next slide that will show us Europe. That's probably what you guys are most interested in. So we could see a fantastic recovery, really a fantastic recovery from June up until August. That was surprisingly to me. I thought the end of August would already be a bit worse, but that was still pretty good, despite we had these upcoming travel restrictions again. So, but after Europe opened up end of May, beginning of June, you can really see that this is a artificially created crisis here in tourism or in the aviation industry because of all these restrictions. If they are gone, markets recovered very, very quickly. You can see that happened between June and August. And now with spiking cases, the numbers are going down again. So it cannot be stressed out enough that our politicians need to find a way on how to overcome these travel restrictions, because they're the number one. I mean, it's clear to everyone, but that's it can't be stressed out enough that this is what is preventing our industry to coming back. Maybe we go to the next slide. North America. If you are into the North American business, there's not much hope. We had a bit of a recovery in May when they already lowered their measures, and though they have a more, let's say, liberal approach to this crisis with less restrictions, you can see that this pandemic going on is just restricting their recovery. So they're just stagnating. And maybe also one thing to note here, we had that before on the grounded fleet in August, they reactivated one single aircraft that was reactivated, and the number just stayed where it was. So that was pretty interesting. If we go to the next slide, we see South America. South America is, after they had been on a super low level for a long time, they're starting to slowly come back. We saw that now here in August. And then there's a peak in this first August week where they were super excited and they filed a lot of capacity, and then they had to take it out again a bit. But that's actually what we saw in Asia and Europe as well when the recovery started. So South America might be a market to come back now. The same goes for the next market, actually. If we look at Africa, Africa also shows a little trend of recovery. And then the last one, last but not least, is Oceania, where we're just seeing a stagnating market. And that's pretty much it from my side. That's the newest rundown on numbers.